Morning all. I was playing against Cengiz Hasman last night in the North Circular League. He's one of the higher rated opponents I could face in that particular league. I was playing whites. He played against my d4. He played for a Czech Benoni, which goes like this: after d5 to play e5. And I had an idea against the Czech Benoni, a system which I was basically attracted to from a Chris Ward game once. Black's putting all the pawns on dark squares, well, a lot of pawns on dark squares, so these light squares are potentially, weaker. And this is the light square defender, the bishop on c8, you could argue. And a Chris Ward game which attracted me was basically to exchange off the light square defender. And black has got a similar plan actually, usually with bishop e7, and then often putting bishop g5 to put the question to this bishop. If white plays e4, then this bishop's kind of in harmony with the pawns, the light pawns having the dark square bishop. And this would be the blocked in bishop. So that's the sort of strategy for the bishop exchanges for both sides. So I went for the light square bishop exchange strategy. So g3 is not with the intention of simply entering. I make sure b5 is prevented. Okay, it does weaken the b4 square, and he actually uses that fact pretty soon actually. Play h4, and now it's revealed that I want to play bishop h3. So 98 bishop h3, and he locks the queen side with a5, and that may be not as bad as it might seem for weakening b5, because the problem with b5 is not as exploitable as as putting a knight there, because the knight is holding up e4, and here black's got f5 undermining e4, so the knight really can't afford the luxury of trying to exploit b5 in some theoretical sense. It's really holding up the center. So I thought this is an interesting idea actually. Now Houdini seems to think black's slightly better here already, so this is quite an interesting idea, this whole thing. If we just get an engine evaluation here, well, it's almost about equal anyway. So I exchange off the light square bishop defender, so knight h3, because I don't want an invasion via g4, so I've got to keep an eye on g4 here. And maybe, if f5 I can pounce with knight g5, threatening knight e6. So knight to a6 is coming into the b4 square. And, okay, it's difficult for me to play this position that easily, because I have got light square weaknesses myself. And I came up with this plan of g4 with sort of rather optimistic idea maybe one day of rook a3 at this point, and then maybe knight b5 and rook g3 and g5. It never materialized actually. He played knight b4 and I played g5, and he played the quick f5, and it sharpens up the position, gives me the semi-open g file, but I've got pawn weaknesses now. I'm getting fragmented pawns. These pawns will be weaker after g takes, knight takes, and he's threatening things like queen g4, and I have to prevent queen g4. I do this with bishop g5. So if queen g4, I can just take, then take on e7 after knight g4. So he plays h6, but I think he's at least equal. So I think I've messed up really here for black to have, or be even better here. Definitely, I've played maybe a bit too luxuriously on the main plan that I originally had. Black's actually better according to engine evaluation anyway here. So I take on f6 and I try and lock down the light squares, fearful that if I sort of use the pawn sack idea, queen e2, bishop takes h4, castle queenside, maybe he can either retreat the bishop or maybe g5. I think that's asking for it because of queen h5. So if we have a quick look actually at this idea of sacking the pawn, this is probably quite interesting, but it's probably too dangerous to take there. Or can black get away with it? It's not the sort of thing a sort of human wants to do. It's the sort of thing an engine wants to do, to take that pawn. Actually, does it even give it as the best move? does mention it, yes, as the best move. So that pawn is really literally on from a technical point of view. So h5, it is a bind on the light squares anyway, positioning to keep the pawn. As long as I can castle queenside. I hallucinated a worrying variation here actually, which was incorrect. Something like bishop h4, and I thought this knight was going to be tactically quite dangerous for something like queen takes h3, rook takes, and I sort of thought rook helm, queen takes, and then knight d3. But of course, looking at it in post-mortem, this doesn't quite work because of rook takes d3. But that's the kind of tactic I was a bit concerned of with, which is obviously a miscalculation. But he played to my relief at the time of the game, you know, last night, rook f7. So I'm able to sort of try and castle queenside now, at least. So I castle queenside, queen d7. This knight's a bit tied down to a4. Rook. And not only that, the rooks are now going to gang up on my pawn, f-pawn, and there's probably an infiltration as well to be concerned about, which is not easily defendable with rook g1, because imagine rook f8, rook g3, bishop h4 is possible. This resource bishop h4 rears its head again there. So I played this instead, which is, I think, is a good move, to play f3, and looks a bit passive, but also by playing f3 the knight might be able to reroute later to the center. Reroute, as the Americans might say. It's funny, that pronunciation of routing, internet routing. Anyway, so bishop h4, and maybe he's got the idea of bishop g3 to f4. Okay, I want to try and get this knight to f5. That's my plan here, to try and at least try and make use of the previous light square weakening strategy. So I play first b3, because otherwise I'm going to lose that a pawn. Bishop d8. I wasn't sure what he was doing here. Thought maybe I'm getting back into the game. This king b1 is just to make sure the king's a little bit safer before venturing this knight now to f5. And I'm starting to get, I think, the potential for an advantage. So knight f5 here. He can consider sacking the exchange here already, with rook takes f5 in exchange for a pawn. It's not totally clear. Let's just engine check this. Rook takes f5 immediately. The advantage is like 0.39 for white, but I think it's quite a difficult position to play. Say bishop h4. You see what's happened here is, you know, the fragmented pawns. Apparently white might have an advantage, but 0.58, I don't know, it's a bit murky because of these weak pawns. Even this position, maybe he could have just sacked the exchange straight off the bat here. So that's the big problem. Knight f5, although it looks good, it is a tactical target. And strategically, you know, he's breaking up pawns by sacking the exchange, so it's sort of Petrosian-esque. It's adding to his positional security by damaging my pawn structure. But for the moment, he does the expected rerouting of his knight, rerouting to like this square, to try and contest and pressurize the dark squares, keep the dark square blockade. So knight f6, and now he plays after knight f2, which is a knight centralization, but the dark square grip now is clearly evident with that knight here rather than here. It wasn't really doing much there anyway, so here is actually kind of more to do with king safety. And now he times the exchange sack here with rook takes f5, takes, queen takes. Now here there are certain possibilities to play f4 at various points in this game after the exchange sack, and here's like one of the earliest points in fact. f4 might have been playable here, for example e4, defending the pawn, queen g4, and I missed this queen g4, but this might actually be quite good for white to exchange up in this particular position. It might be okay, but it's difficult, always difficult with these rooks and these weak pawns. This is an echo of things to come. So I played actually just knight after here knight f2, offering f3, but of course if he did take on f3 he'd be in big trouble. I think I was going to play like this, knight e4, just hitting d6, and then there's an infiltration by force so that would be clearly better. So he's got to avoid that, and he does. So he plays bishop e7. So I get a seemingly nice knight, which would be nice against a king's Indian, but here it's quite different. I've got these two weak pawns. So his Petrosian style exchange sack seems quite justified here, and he's got a fortress-like position. Because I've got no pawn breaks, he's locked down on the pawn breaks like b4. The rooks are not the best rooks in the world. One of his fellow teammates called them backward rooks, defending backward pawns. This backward pawn on the semi-open file here, does that mean this rook is a backward rook? Possibly, you could label it a backward rook. It's pretty passive. And this one's just defending, h5. So knight takes here. After queen e4, I did have a time advantage, but I couldn't actually see a constructive plan now after his next move, bishop g5, which of course intensifies the pressure on f4 and doesn't mind the exchange of queens. And because I couldn't see a constructive plan, and he's a kind of teammate as well in Hearts League when he plays for Barnet, him and David Cutmore, so I didn't mind offering a draw here, even though I was ahead on the clock. I just thought maybe I was even worse here, because I played queen takes f5 and actually sheepishly offered a draw, because after rook takes f5, these rooks seem actually quite bad. Not only that, maybe he's got active plans later, and also there's another active plan of getting the king here to play g6 to force through an outside pass pawn. And I was looking at that with one of his teammates in post-mortem, in the second post-mortem. There were two post-mortems of this game, one with Cengiz and one with his teammate later, who was fascinated by the position. And this looked to be actually better for black if black starts realising that plan. It's difficult to believe black's the exchange down and potentially winning by force, but it might actually be the case here that this evaluation could actually go down. I mean, would an engine see that though? If I just shorten this to give you a bit more of the engine analysis view. Okay, the two lines here. Okay, you can see the two lines here. It's just a small advantage for white. But with his teammate, we looked at this forcing the outside pass pawn. Okay, so say we give white a null move. So say g6. So black's getting, look at the advantage shrinking anyway. And it looks as though black's got all the pressure still, and it's created that outside pass pawn. You can see that it's shrinking and shrinking. The evaluation for it, it's like a dead position for white here. But it's still technically giving an advantage. So this is the critical thing. What happens after e4? Okay, e3. And can the king even come in? It's starting to be almost dead equal now here. You see, this forcing of the pass pawn, the outside pass pawn and the bishop is very good. The weakened dark squares in white's position means it's a very, very passive position actually. In fact, so if he forces an exchange of rooks, the king comes in, maybe, he's nearly black is winning, but maybe not quite. Maybe it's just about a fortress. If I can stop the king coming to g3, yeah, this is just about a fortress. So he'd have to protect his pawn here as well. Okay, if I can reach this fortress position, it'll be a draw. So it was actually very, very difficult after being the exchange up here. So something positionally bad. There's actually no play for white here in this position where I offer the draw, the exchange up. So technically it might look as though materially white is better, but the material quality is very limited. So structurally black's better. On the only semi-open file, I've got a weak pawn. I've got a weak pawn here. This bishop's constraining the dark squares. So this is a good test of evaluation skills. If you think white's better because of the material, black's better because of positional considerations for piece quality. I think actually black's got all the prospects here for creating an outside pass pawn by bringing the king in and then playing g6. So probably it was a well-timed draw offer before the torture sets in, with that sort of plan in particular. So I don't really know. It seems earlier actually there was a critical position where f4 might have been playable. After, instead of knight e4 here, actually there was f4 tactically here, which I missed. Instead of knight f2, 31 f4 here. No, not here, sorry, knight e4. Instead of knight e4, there was f4 in this position, which seems ridiculous in some respects, but it's logical. If takes, then queen e7. If queen takes, there's the tactical move trapping the queen, which I missed, knight e4. The queen cannot go here because of the knight, it cannot go there because of the queen, so it's actually trapping the queen. So I missed this tactical possibility, and apparently, you know, this breaks open the position with some advantage to white, I think. So if bishop f6, taking on e5, and white's going to be good now. So that's the moments I missed a trick. So after bishop e7, instead of knight e4, to play the move f4. So maybe the sense of urgency here is kind of missing from my play, because I just fought the exchange up, but there's a sense of urgency here to avoid this positional exchange sacrifice being so effective. The rook quality has got to be increased somehow, and maybe the backward rook syndrome is created by this weak f3 pawn. So being able to jettison this pawn at a key moment might be key to this position to increase the rook quality, and this might be the key moment to play f4. I don't know what you guys think, but without this key moment being used, black ends up getting a very strong grip on the position, like in the game. Although this looks good, knight to play knight e4, black is able to just get rid of that knight and maintain then the dark square grip. So I've lost my chance to basically liberate this pawn. So basically this is a sitting duck later after the queen exchange for a later g6, forcing through this as an outside pass pawn. So that's very interesting actually. The point of liberation was missed tactically, not playing f4 there. So I quite agree with the engine thing. That was an opportunity completely missed, and tactically making use of course of the pin on e5. So that's a shame. I played more of a visual move here, just knight e4. But let's go back, just one more quick pass through the game. So Czech Benoni, somewhat ambitious strategy of exchanging the light square bishops, but leaving me with some weaknesses to deal with. So this f5 was very good. It pronounced certain weaknesses in my position. So f2 and h4, and the exchange sack later kind of mocked this light square strategy, that even if I got a knight to f5, all that knight is a tactical liability for a positional exchange sacrifice. So rather cruel, but the evidence of the game, it turned out to be the case. Even immediately rook f5, you know, is possible, but he didn't play that immediately. And so maybe, you know, as I say, I missed a trick that to avoid a backward rook here. f4 here as well would have been good. So the key thing, maybe one of the instructive themes is avoiding backward rooks, because of this f4 missed on two occasions. So one here and one here to play f4 here. Instead I played knight e4, so I'm ending up with a backward rook for sure after the knights get exchanged, and the dark square blockade is intensified with bishop g5. So it's Petrosian-esque, this game from black, and it was perhaps a well-timed draw offer here after queen takes f5 for what could have happened later. Black's just got all the planning, all the piece quality here. Comments or questions on YouTube? Thanks very much.